Welcome to One on One with Mitch Lafon, and joining me on this episode, it is former Tiger of Pan Tang's bassist Richard "Rocky" Laws. We talk about the history of the band, working with John Sykes, his feelings of what the band is doing now, going on with the name, and a lot more. Before checking that out, please head over to Twitter and check me out at Mitch Lafon, MITCHLAFON. And should you care to support the podcast, please maybe send a little donation to paypal.me/Mitch Lafon. And with that, here is the one, the only, Rocky Laws. We are speaking with Richard "Rocky" Laws, formerly of Tygers of Pan Tang. Pleasure to speak with you, Richard.
Hi, Mitch. Yeah, good to speak to you.
And I'm assuming it's been probably a few years since somebody actually referred to you as Rocky, right?
Well, actually, my sister still calls me Rocky, strangely, which is the only one who does. But yeah, absolutely. No, I haven't been Rocky for quite a long time.
Quite a long time. So
yeah.
Let's talk about sort of the Tygers of Pan Tang and the history, but let's start with now. What are you doing these days? Are you still at all involved in the music industry on any level?
Yes, absolutely. I've worked in the music industry for years. I'm a lawyer in the music industry, so I've been doing that for more than 25 years now. When the band finished, that's what I did. I went and studied law and became a lawyer.
Is it corporate law or is it copyright law? What kind of sort of?
Well, it's music law. It's record contracts, publishing contracts, merchandising, stuff like that. Mostly, I act for companies rather than artists these days. So it's not really artist based, but it's I'm the enemy of the artists, I guess, because I'm acting for the companies that sign them, the record companies and the merchandising companies. But so that's what I've been doing for many years now.
That's actually interesting. Is the music business in as much trouble as everybody likes to claim, where record contracts don't mean anything anymore and you don't get signed to a label anymore? Or do you not see that at all doing what you do?
Well, it's changed a lot. I mean, the problems are not exaggerated. It's changed dramatically. I mean, when I was in the Tigers, the situation was that you made money from recording, and you played live to promote the recordings. And playing live was a very expensive thing to do, and generally speaking, you lost money doing it. Whereas these days, there's not much money in recordings anymore, and people make money playing live, but you have to have a record out for a promoter to book you on a tour. So it's kind of completely flipped round. And of course, the internet has had a dramatic effect on record sales. And the kind of money that's made from streaming is nothing like it used to be in the old days with CDs. When I first started working in the music business as a lawyer, it was just at that sort of boom time when CDs came out, and essentially the industry was getting everybody to buy their entire record collections a second time. That was a real sort of golden age for the industry. But for streaming, especially if you're signed through a record company, you're getting quite a small percentage of quite a small amount of money for each play. It's quite difficult, I think, for artists these days. But there are other opportunities. There is money in other things. People have to sort of diversify. There's a lot more money in things like having your music used in films and adverts, and there is a lot more ways that music is used now than there used to be. But it's a more sophisticated, more complex business. But yeah, I'd say it's probably harder to make good money as an artist these days than it used to be.
Yeah, and diversification is important. And I'll get to the Tigers in a second, but is streaming really that much of an enemy in a sense? when you go on Spotify, I'll go listen to bands that I probably wouldn't spend $10 on, and then I discover stuff, and at the same time, they get that stream, and it's sort of the same money as AM and FM radio was paying back in the day, except now you don't have to have somebody put you on a playlist. The fan can choose to visit you. I mean, it's sort of it's like the modern day radio in a sense, right?
Well, of course, if you look at it as the modern day radio, then it's not such a bad thing. But I don't think radio used to take away from sales, whereas obviously streaming does. People now stream instead of buying something. And I think at the top end, artists who would sell a lot of records that will have a lot of streams, and especially those that actually, don't go through a record company and do it themselves, they can still make a lot of money through streaming. But I think at the lower end, at the end where you wouldn't be selling that many records, in the days where a CD would sell for sort of, the wholesale price anyway would be sort of $7.99 or something. The artist could get £1 a CD or something like that, or maybe more. It would take an awful lot of plays to make that pound, or dollar or whatever. But where if you were only going to sell a few thousand records anyway, you'll make nothing from streaming, whereas you would have made something from selling records. I think that's the difference. At the top end, somebody like Adele is still going to make an awful lot of money. But I think for the people who sort of struggle more at the other end, I think it's harder for them.
Yeah. I just see it sort of on the positive that on the low end, somebody might discover you, and then you might get that ad stream or that movie stream or that that other opportunity, whereas you may not in the past. And if you're on the lower end, MCA might not have put your CD out back in 1985, but now that you can sort of dump it on the anyway.
Well, it's certainly easier to get your music to the public. There are companies now that you can sign up to, and they will put your music on iTunes and Spotify and everything, and even if only friends and family are going to buy it, you can still have it up there, and of course it's up to you to then go out and market it and create the demand for it. That is really the role of a record company. Is really, it's the marketing is what they do. Actually, putting music out there now has never been easier. But I think as a band, it's not difficult to get noticed. It never has been, and it isn't now. I think some people, in fact, their problem is they get noticed too quickly before they're ready and get dismissed as not being something that the industry would be interested in, and then there's kind of no way back from that. But
that's a great point, by the way. You get out there and you put a YouTube video in. You look back in the old days when you think of Aerosmith or Kiss and all that, even Bon Jovi, they didn't get famous to their third album, most of them, and they had that time to develop. Now, somebody sits in their basement, puts together a video, throws it up on YouTube, and of course everybody looks at it and goes, well, what was that? So
yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah.
So let's lead that into Tygers of Pan Tang. The early days when you were working to get a record deal. Jess Cox, the vocalist at that time, gave you sort of a punk vibe, if you want. But yet you got lumped into the sort of new wave of British heavy metal. What was the band trying to be? Were you more sort of Sex Pistol-ish, or were you more what was Iron Maiden doing and what those bands were doing of that new wave?
Well, we weren't trying to be anything. Okay. What we sort of were was just sort of what came out. It's really the punk thing. I don't think really probably came particularly from Jess. Rob had been in a punk band. Brian was very keen on punk music, and I was quite a fan of punk as well. We all liked sort of heavy rock, and but we liked punk too. I mean, I've always just liked anything with guitars, really. I'm not, I was never sort of tied to any particular genre as long as it had guitars in it. But I think when we got together, it was sort of an amalgam of just the things that we were into and just our sound. I mean, it just kind of came out. The first time that Rob, Brian, and me played together, we just straight away, it was just like we knew there was something interesting there. It was just you kind of just knew straight away, but it didn't really sound like anybody else. It just was what it was, and there was a sort of punk thing there. I mean, the punk thing as well, I think, came from we were fairly limited in our musical ability, to be honest, and I think that was there was a lot of the sort of punk ethos was to, you just got out there and played. It didn't really matter whether you'd sort of spent 10 years perfecting your musicianship. You just got out there and played, and that was kind of what we did. You sort of learnt on the job, so to speak. You just got out and played and hoped for the best. So I think we were kind of working with those limitations, really. And there was the sort of punk influence, the limitations, everything else just created that sound. And we didn't even really sort of think, oh, let's get together a heavy metal band or anything. It was just like, let's play together and see what happens. And I didn't even necessarily think anything would come of it. I mean, when I persuaded Brian to come and jam with Rob, I mean, it was, I didn't know whether they'd like each other or play well together or anything. It just, I'd never been in a band. It was the first time I'd ever played in a band situation. The first time the three of us played together, that was the first time I'd ever played with anybody. So, I really didn't know what to expect. But it just kind of, we knew straight away that it was something. And so, yeah, and thought, well, yeah, we'll try, get a singer and take it from there. And I can't really remember the first singer we had, I can't remember how we got him, but he looked and sounded like Geddy Lee. And, we did about 25 shows with that first singer. It was, I think he kind of wasn't as committed to it as the rest of us were, so he left at that point. But, we wrote quite a lot of songs at that stage. It was we were giving it a go. But yeah, it was kind of what it was. We didn't sort of, it wasn't deliberately, we weren't trying to be a particular kind of band. Although I suppose you've got to think in terms of the choice of cover songs that you did, and those were they were all sort of rock songs. They would be Ted Nugent, AC/DC. We did a reasonably convincing version of Bastille Day by Rush, given that the singer looked and sounded like Geddy Lee. But so it was that kind of thing. We didn't play any punk stuff, but it was all rock. But yeah, and then when the sort of second version of the band got going, I mean, we think of Jess as a founding member because that was the version of the band that first recorded. So he really, we think of him as a founding member, but he wasn't the original singer. And yeah, I can't remember the question now, but that was how we kind of got going.
No, yeah, and it's funny because as you were talking, I'm trying. In my mind, I had set up that I was going to go through the albums separately, but looking at it from your perspective today, as the job that you have in the role that you have today, what are some of the mistakes you saw that Tygers were making now? Looking back, you say, man, we could have survived a little bit longer had we not done this and had we done that instead.
Well, the thing is, a lot of it's not in your own hands, or at least it's not, there are circumstances which arise that you don't really have a lot of control over. I mean, one of the sort of crucial sort of strange things that happened was that after Spellbound, we were supposed to do a live album. That was what we were going to do. And we recorded a live album. It did eventually come out about 20 years later, but, we got a mobile studio.